Welcome in, everybody, to week number 13 of Indiana high school football here in Northeast Indiana. My name is Jeff Mahoney, and as always, we have Casey O'Boyle from Northeast Indiana Game Night. And wow, Casey, there were some real upsets this past week, and I was watching the NFL, and the Jaguars beat the Bills. So it seems like the upsets just kind of trickled over. But yeah, what do you think of this past week? And I see you got a new shirt on, so obviously you were affected by it.
Well, I'm a man of my word, Jeff, as you know, and this is the Eastside Blazers shirt for 2021. Coach Todd Mason puts out a shirt every year, and he gives them to fans, believe it or not, as they come to games. And by the end of the season, of course, it's a sea of green up there in Butler. And I promised him when I went up to drop off game night early in the season, picked up Laban Davis's helmet, of course, that I would, he gave me this shirt, and I promised them if they upset Lures, which I didn't think they could or would, that I would wear it on our show. That being said, I'm gonna put on a game night fleece. I kept my word, Coach Mason. And but what a win it was. And to your point, the Blazers over Lures last week, Bishop Dwenger over Schneider last week. I feel like Mr. Rogers right now. And then of course the biggest shocker of all of them, Northridge upsetting undefeated Leo up in Middlebury. Just a stunner. So a lot of great action, but now I feel like myself again.
Yeah, and beating them in overtime. Well, Casey, let's start off here in 6A where the Carroll Chargers, they prevail. And wow, what a dominating win over Warsaw here, 36-0 over the Warsaw Tigers. Carroll this week, they have Westfield. Westfield ranked number 2 in the state, Carroll at number 6. And obviously last year, Homestead went down to Westfield for a regional game, and the Shamrocks really put it to them. Do you think things could be differently in this matchup here against Carroll? You got the Shamrocks winning it by 13.
Yeah, I mean, there's something about this Carroll team. I mean, they have definitely improved steadily all year long. I think most of us that follow high school football in Northeast Indiana would agree that this may be the most improved team from week one. And I think especially on the defensive side of the ball, I think they've improved vastly in that area. They looked really good here in the postseason now with basically a couple goose eggs against two pretty good teams in Homestead and Warsaw. To avenge a loss from a year ago and to do it the way that they did, I think is really impressive. And look at that. There we go. 3 straight goose eggs in 4 of their last, 6 games. So pretty impressive, that defense, what they're doing out there in Charger land. I think because of that defense and because of Jeff Becker making plays with his feet and with his arm, I think the Chargers hang around. I still think the Shamrocks, because of their strength of schedule, probably deserve to be a 2-score favorite. But again, you never know. You get this deep into the playoffs, anything can happen. Sooner or later, one of our 6A teams, Jeff, is going to break through. And it may as well be this year. So we're certainly pulling for the Chargers. But again, I just think Westfield has a little bit of an edge in the trenches, and that strength of schedule, I think, will pay dividends.
Yeah, and speaking of Carroll, that big victory holding Warsaw scoreless in that game, Jeff Becker throws for 1 touchdown, just 59 yards passing on 6 completions on 15 attempts, but he ran for 126 yards with 3 touchdowns in that game. Do you feel like this is a game against Westfield where the passing game can pick up for Carroll?
It could. It's my understanding that Jamison Coverstone is going to be out, which is a huge loss for Carroll. They were able to withstand that loss a week ago against the Tigers, but this is a little different beast, I think, in Westfield. So they're going to miss Jamison for sure if he's not able to go. I think it may be a game time decision. It may not, but according to my sources, he's likely not going to play in this contest. So we'll have to keep an eye on things, but they've got some other playmakers. They didn't really showcase them last week, but they didn't have to either. I think, they got control of the game fairly early. Becker did a lot with his feet, which we thought he might. and he's just a natural leader. And that defense is so good. Once they got that lead, it was pretty clear after a short time that Carroll was the superior team.
Yeah, and for Carroll defensively, 3 players and double-digit tackles, something to be expected going against that run-heavy team in Warsaw. Dylan Bennett led the team with 14 tackles. Braden Steely, the sophomore safety, had 9 tackles in that game. So going to be really interesting against a Westfield team that, lost their first game of the season against Cathedral, and they haven't lost since. So lost it 14-0, but since then they've run the table.
Yeah, they've got a really good quarterback, Maximus Webster, completing 72% of his passes. And I think he's thrown for, almost 2,000 yards. So early on, Carroll's defense struggled a little bit against good passing teams. Remember what Bishop Luers did to the Chargers in week 1. But since they've steadily gotten better, and I look at that litmus test a couple of weeks ago against a Homestead offense that had been improving. Now, granted, maybe the weather wasn't the greatest, but still, that game was on turf, and Peyton Slavin and the Homestead offense had improved quite a bit, I think, throughout the course of the season. For Carroll to put up a goose egg in that contest tells me that they've improved dramatically. But again, Westfield's got some players. This is going to be, I think, a difficult matchup for Carroll. They're going to have to get pressure on the quarterback, and if they do, they definitely have a shot.
Yeah, Webster, who was their quarterback last year, a big QB that runs that read option really, really well. Like you said, Casey, he can run it and he can pass it over there for the Shamrocks.
So and they've got three receivers, with over 400 yards and another one with 355 yards. So they don't have that one key guy like a Brody Glenn. They've got 4 guys that they spread it around to pretty darn equally. It's going to be a real matchup nightmare, I think, for the Chargers defense.
Yeah, and on the other side, you got Maryville beating Penn by 23 points. So obviously the 2 winners there will match up.
Yeah, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I think Carroll, if they would win, would host if it's Maryville, I think, and maybe go on the road if it's Penn. I could be wrong about that.
Yeah, we'll double check that one a little bit later. Moving on into Class 5A, what a game by Bishop Dwenger. I mean, I think some people thought Dwenger had a shot in that game against Snyder, but I don't think many people thought that they would beat Snyder the way they did. They're going to travel to Zionsville in a rematch of last year. And Casey, you got Dwenger winning it by 1 this year.
Well, and that kind of just flipped here recently, but I'll be honest with you. I mean, I asked the question, and I'll ask you, Jeff, if Snyder would have beaten Dwenger last week, would you be taking Snyder to beat Zionsville? Analyzing the scores and the records and their stats, I think the answer for me would have been yes. And Dwenger didn't just beat Snyder in a fluky way. It's not like the Panthers had, 5 or 6 turnovers or, fumbled a punt inside their 5-yard line. There were some key plays in the game, but Bishop Dwenger outplayed Snyder a week ago. The changes that the Saints made with their personnel, I thought were fantastic. And you got to start playing your dudes. And I spoke with an assistant coach who's a friend of mine last week, and he said, we're going with our dudes. And so I'd already made my prediction. I really felt like Dwenger had a legit shot. So, yeah, I think Dwenger can win this game, but it's going to be a tough one for sure. I mean, Zionsville's got a big offensive lineman that's going to Notre Dame. They've got some really good middle linebackers that played in last year's game when the Eagles won by 9 points. So this is no gimme by any means, but I think the Saints match up just fine with them. And I think Dwenger is going to go down there again with a chip on their shoulder and put forth a good effort. I like what the Saints did with Jack Titman. I mean, he's even playing on the kickoff team, for crying out loud. I love it. He was, they moved him around and he played a lot of fullback, almost like an H-back sometimes. When he wasn't in an I formation, they did some split back things. They had KJ Titman playing some fullback. I liked some quick hitters with him. So they just did just enough to keep Snyder off balance. And then Bodie Dickerson, the junior quarterback, we talked about him, had a tremendous game. That step aside throw where he hit Rocco in the back of the end zone right before half was a huge play. He made a couple other big throws throughout the course of the game. And I like what the Saints have done as far as committing to their players, their studs, if you will. Sam Campbell on the reverse, utilizing his dual ability to throw the ball. He was looking to throw that. He made the right decision and tucked it and scored. And the Saints went up 28-12. And for all practical purposes, that was the game right there early in the fourth quarter last week against Snyder. But Carter Minix, they're utilizing him more. Stellan Rustin, junior tight end. Of course, Rocco Sioka and Henry O'Keefe, KJ Tittman, Jack Tittman. I mean, going into the season, this is what I expected Bishop Dwenger football to look like. And for whatever reason, it took, 12 weeks for things to kind of gel or mesh, if you will. Now it feels like they've got all their guys on the field, maxing out. I really liked the move with Shane Lee, Adam Lee. Shane's his father, Adam Lee to middle linebacker, and they blitzed him like crazy. And he was a difference maker on that side of the ball. Henry O'Keefe played corner. I don't think he's played much corner since maybe 8th grade. He got beat on a couple deep balls. So it's not like he played a perfect game. He was in good position on both of those, mind you. But he hasn't played a whole lot of defensive back, at least in 3 years, if not 4. But that interception he made when they were down 6-0 was pivotal. To me, that was the play of the game. And you got to credit the Saints coaches for pushing the right buttons. And I thought Coach Garrett called a really nice game with the offensive play calling. And this is a dangerous Dwenger team right now that, to me, looks like they've turned that corner, and there's no reason they can't win at Zionsville and keep this thing going.
Casey, I'll agree with you. Snyder, they did look pretty good there. Hopper, 7 of 12 passing, 189 yards, 3 touchdowns. You kind of got the feel early on when he hit Juarez for that first big touchdown, a 73-yarder, that, oh, here we go again. But honestly, By the end of that game, Snyder, it just looked like they were done taking the big hits from Bishop Dwenger, the fullback KJ Tittman, the fullback
Jack Tittman
and KJ at running back. I mean, they were just kind of done banging heads with the Saints.
Yeah, and they also did a nice job with some play action with those guys. They would fake a power play, and then Bodie would turn and hit a little wide receiver screen. I mean, the play calling I thought was very clever and well-timed. That interception early on the reverse pass with Rocco, I personally didn't like that call, but if it works, it's a brilliant call. But I thought they had Snyder on their heels a little bit, and maybe that's why you call that there. But they overcame it, and that's the thing. And talking to the coaches out there, had a good exchange with Coach Garrett this week. They were our B. Antonio's team of the week. We brought pizza out for the Saints. They're really excited about this team. They're excited about how they handled adversity, and they did not get down at any point last week. Even though they already lost to Snyder just a few weeks prior, the Saints kept plowing away. Even after a couple of those mistakes early on, a couple breakdowns early on, they easily could have folded up the tent, and they didn't. They seized control there in the second quarter, got that touchdown late in the second quarter to go up 21-12, I believe, at the break. And then after pretty much a fairly even third quarter, they just put it away in the fourth. And they just that 81-yard run by KJ Tittman, where Jack Tittman actually had 2 chip blocks from his fullback position. And then there was some wide receiver stalk blocking as well. That was a thing of beauty. And then the stiff arms. This, to me, is what I expected this team to look like all year long. And for whatever reason, they were choppy at best. I mean, they really didn't beat anybody this year that they weren't supposed to. And I'll be honest with you, Jeff, and we talked about this the other day. I think this might be the biggest win in Coach Garrett's 4 years at the helm, even bigger than the state championship 4 years ago, because this is a team that they lost to pretty easily just a few weeks prior. Everybody was picking the Panthers, and rightfully so. And again, Dwenger didn't just win this game in fluky fashion. They dominated the game. And I think it's, I think this is going to be one of those benchmark games for Coach Garrett that the Saints program can look to as they keep trying to rack up championships.
Yeah, honestly, I kind of feel like Dwenger's in a better position than they were a year ago heading into this game with Zionsville. And I agree with you. I think the Saints are going to pull this one out. And you're 100% correct. Losing 4 of 5 games right there in the middle of the schedule to come back and to win it 42-20 against the Panthers, a team that's been ranked atop the 5A polls all season long. Many picked Snyder to win the SAC, and they ended up winning it, sharing the title with Carroll and Lures. I'd agree with you. What an impressive win.
And then looking at just analyzing some stats from Zionsville, they've got a sophomore quarterback. Last year, they had a really, really talented senior quarterback that, in my opinion, was the difference in the game. He was a hard runner. He made some key plays in that win last year for the Eagles. This year, the Murphy kid has got decent stats, but he's also thrown 6 interceptions. And against a ball-hawking Saints defense, and especially with the changes the Saints have made, I think they're going to get after that kid all night long. Coming off the edge, I expect Gavin Groves to be sent on some blitz packages, and Shane Lee sometimes on the same snap. And then, of course, the rushing attack, they've got a senior by the last name of Price, 7.3 yards per carry, almost 1,700 yards. That will be a matchup to watch, especially with Joey Tonona, the big 6'6", 290-pound lineman that's going to Notre Dame. The Saints need to find a way to keep Price from controlling tempo. And I want to see the play calling. I want to see the aggressiveness. I want to see the going forward on 4th down, all that intact. I want to see Doringer going out and playing like they did a week ago against Snyder. If they do that, Jeff, I think they find a way to win. I do still think it might be a slight upset because I think Zionsville's schedule is still formidable and they've got some nice players. And it's going to be a tough one for the Saints, but going on the road 2 hours to the northern Indianapolis area, it's not going to be an easy trek. But by last week's measure, I think the Saints match up just fine. And I think they find a way to pull it out.
Yeah, and the winner of this game will play the winner of Valparaiso and Michigan City.
Yeah, and I don't know a ton about those teams yet. I think Valpo gets the job done there. I believe they beat Michigan City earlier this year by 21 points. And so if Michigan City would win, Dwenger would host. If not, the Saints would have to go up to Valpo again, and that would be, a little bit of a deja vu for Bishop Dwenger fans. But certainly a very winnable game. That Valparaiso team is good, but I don't think it's as good as it was 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, could you imagine that getting kind of redemption if they were to beat Zionsville, who beat them last year, and then to go to Valpo and beat them, who beat them 2 years ago? That'd be quite the story.
Well, and on the heels of beating Snyder in your first ever postseason game after losing to them in the regular season. We talk a lot about redemption. I mean, think about it. Carroll in 6A avenged last year's loss to Warsaw, right? 5A, we just talked about it. Bishop Dwenger avenging their regular season loss to Snyder. 4A, Northridge avenged a 14-7 loss to Leo in 4A. And then, of course, Eastside, we talked at the top of the show, upset Lures after losing to them last year. So a lot of revenge opportunities, if you will. And it just shows you how teams can change, Jeff, from year to year in terms of personnel and adjustments and coaching and everything else. And that's what makes, I think, high school football so special. None of this stuff is scripted. It's changes from week to week, year to year, and it's so much fun for guys like you and I to follow closely.
Casey, in 4A, Mississinewa traveling to Northridge, the Indians, with sectional wins over New Haven and then Wayne, and then Northridge beating Leo last week in overtime. Wow. That right there just, I know, shocked everybody. I was at the game last year with Northridge. I don't want to say they were lucky to win that game, but it wasn't easy up there, and they won it 14-7. But I thought for sure this year, having Mason, Sharon, and everybody else back, Caden Miller healthy, that Leo would win that game. And you got Northridge beating Mississinewa by 9 in this one. And you don't think Northridge has the size, or Mississinewa has the size to match up with Northridge?
No, they definitely do. I just think playing at home, coming off that big win against Leo, there's a lot of momentum there. And I think their strength of schedule is a little bit better than Mississinewa's. So I do think it's a fairly competitive game. But, man, to beat Leo, I mean, I was shocked. I don't know what's quite going on out there. This, to me, felt like a once-in-a-generation Leo senior class. I mean, basically 4 Division I football players in that senior class. You're going to be hard pressed in the coming years, I think, to have that kind of personnel at any local program, but especially at Leo, which isn't one of, it's not a 5A or 6A school. So they don't have awesome numbers. They've got a nice feeder system, but to lose that game the way they did, very disappointing. They missed a kick late. It just felt like they missed some opportunities. And again, we talked about it all year long, and you hate to beat a dead horse, but they never really committed to throwing the ball. And when you've got a kid like Rylan Crawford and Caden Miller, who are so good in the passing game, and you've got a quarterback like Jackson Barber, who has worked really hard to make himself a better passer. I just think for my money, I would have liked to have seen the Lions work a little bit more on their passing game. You can still run your T formation stuff and throw to your tight ends. You can run some single wideout stuff with Rylan like you did. And oftentimes when they did that, Jeff, you'll recall, they found running seams because they took an extra guy out of the box, and their splits were so tight. They just packed everything in. And sometimes I felt like they played right into their opponent's hands. And last week looked like that to me. I watched a little bit of the game today, and just really shocked. I thought they would go up there and just take care of business and roll, especially because the weather was cooperating. Field conditions were, obviously pristine. And I honestly thought Mason Sharon would rush for 150 yards, and their secondary backs would all get 50 to 75 each. And it would be, 21-0, 28-0 at halftime. And as those scores kept coming in, I think we were all shocked. And, once they went up by a touchdown fairly late, I thought, okay, get a stop, put another one in, and you may not win by 28, but you're going to still win this game comfortably. And it just didn't happen for them. And I feel really bad for those seniors. And I certainly feel bad for the Leo community, because this feels like one that slipped away.
Yeah, and a nice game by the quarterback, Jackson Barber, 6 of 8, throwing the ball for 91 yards, had a touchdown, did have an interception, but a 112 QB rating. So, yeah, a tough loss there. And hats off to Northridge. That's becoming a really solid program there. And they'll take on the winner of Roncalli and Mount Vernon. And, yeah, you just kind of feel like Roncalli's heading to Lucas Oil.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's a parochial power down there. It's won a ton of championships. They play a little tougher schedule than Mount Vernon. So I think the Royals, formerly the Rebels, I made a Billy Idol reference there for old geezers. I think the Royals take care of business.
All right, Casey, well, we're going to move on here to Class 3A, and Norwell winning the sectional title. So a huge year for the Knights. They're 11-1. Their only loss coming to Leo. Going to take on a tough rebuff team.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, again, talking with Coach Josh Gerber, they're excited. They're expecting a big crowd, and they really think that even though they are a junior-dominated team, they've got the personnel that can match up with Brebeuf. And they might. I mean, they keep surprising us. I mean, all year long, with the exception of the Leo game, I think they've done a fantastic job, have the Norwell Knights, and they are healthy. Josh Gerber confirmed to me this morning that all hands are on deck. Everybody's good. You've got a quarterback here for Brebeuf that's thrown for 2,500 yards, 33 touchdowns. So clearly they want to get it out to their playmakers in space and spread it around. They do have a couple decent running backs with around 500 yards apiece, do the Braves. So they're fairly balanced, but they definitely want to throw it. Their top 2 receivers, Walters, a senior, 1,152 yards, and then Ani, also a senior, 965 yards. Those are the 2 guys that you're going to have to lock in on, and they're both capable receivers with huge numbers. Max Walters is definitely, I think, the one that they really like to hit deep balls with. So this is going to be an interesting matchup for sure. I don't think Norwell's seen anything close to this in terms of a passing offense. I mean, you think of the Northeast 8, maybe DeKalb, likes to throw it around a little bit. Certainly East Noble has some passing parts, but they also like to control the tempo with their ground game. And of course, Leo, their one loss, runs it almost exclusively. So this is a tough one, I think, for Norwell. I give them, a fighter's chance playing at home. It's a long trip for Brebeuf, but again, the Knights may be a year away. We're certainly pulling for them, and I wouldn't be surprised if they pulled off an upset, because again, we're deep into November now, playoff football and Indiana high school football. Anything can happen, and but I think Brebeuf has to be considered at least a 2-score favorite.
Another game you had picked here, Mishawaka Marion at Hanover Central, and you got the Knights winning it there by 14.
Yeah, again, Mishawaka Marion, another proven parochial power from the South Bend area. I think, they should go over to Hanover Central and take care of business. Again, no gimme by any means, but I expect the Knights to be triumphant.
Casey, in 2A, Eastbrook now 11-0. And I'll say, you've been calling it for the last 2 years, really, saying how special the quarterback Laban Davis is. Well, he came up big on this past Friday, guiding his team to a victory over Lures.
Indeed, he did. Where's that helmet? I got to bring that gorgeous helmet off, since I'll give this back to Laban at the end of the season. I'm sure he's wearing one of his teammates' helmets. But my goodness, what a win by Eastside. That was another game. I had 2 games pretty much that I was locked in on last week, trying to put all my attention toward the Snyder-Joyner game, and then, of course, Eastside at Lures. Just what an impressive performance. I think Coach Mason and his staff did a fantastic job with their game plan. They just sucked the energy and the clock right out of Lures Field Stadium, and they controlled tempo with their ground game. They used every possible second, it seemed like, on their play clock, and just kept the ball away from Lures. And Lures at times, even early on, to me, it seemed like they were I don't want to say desperate, but like they were just, it seemed like they were going for the deep ball, the home run every play. And I know, having watched the film a little bit the other night, that's not the case. But, I would have liked to see a little bit more of Sir Hale. I think he had only 6 or 7 carries maybe. I thought they had an opportunity there to counter what Eastside was doing, give their defense a rest too, which would have been important, because they dominated the fourth quarter, but it was too little too late. They were down 21-3 going into the final stanza. And by then the damage had been done. And they were gassed, especially on the defensive side of the ball. I would have liked to see a little bit more Sir Hale. Oh, there it is. 12 carries, 61 yards. Okay. Well, he had more than I thought. I thought he only had 7 or 8. But 5 yards a clip, that's not great, but it's not horrible either. And the field conditions were fantastic. Everything set up, I think, for Bishop Lures to make a repeat visit to Lucas Oil Stand, except they were playing a pretty darn good Eastside team. I think that's what we found out. And the jury was out all year long. Eastside plays in the Northeast Corner Conference. It's a small school conference. Even the big schools in that conference, Jeff, weren't as strong as they've been in recent years. West Noble was down a little bit. Garrett, it hasn't been really strong for the last few years. Angola hasn't been nearly what they've been in the last few years. The best teams in that conference come from the small side of it, with Cherubusco and certainly Eastside. And for Eastside to do what they did last week was just so impressive. You got to give, again, all those kids a ton of credit. Dax Holman on both sides of the ball was a beast. Laban Davis making plays all over the field, especially with his legs on offense. And now they've got a tough matchup due to the Eastside Blazers against an undefeated Eastbrook team out of the Marion area. I mean, this is, again, certainly no gimme. And you worry, if you're an Eastside fan, you worry about a letdown, because everybody all year long has been telling you, you can't beat Lures, especially if the weather's good. They've got all their guys back. They're crowned state champions, especially with Western Boone moving out of Class 2A. Sorry, Eastside, here's your runner-up trophy. They didn't buy into that. So the emotions behind this is what concerns me the most, is how do they respond? They need another good first quarter, come out, punch Eastbrook in the face, move the ball on the ground, play that physical brand of Eastside football that Coach Mason has really instilled there, and see where they're at. But stopping Eastbrook is easier said than done. I mean, talking to Coach Mason this morning, he flat out told me they're really, really good. And he said, Coach Adamson's got 300 victories for a reason, and they're really well coached. They play at a pace that can be hard to defend and prepare for. So he knows they're going to be in for a dogfight. He's concerned a little bit about the conditions. I mean, as we tape this on Thursday, it's raining right now. The weather forecast is a little iffy throughout the rest of today and tonight, and they don't have artificial surface up there in Butler. So if that field gets muddied up, that might benefit Eastbrook a little bit. That being said, I still think Eastside's a team of destiny right now. I think they find a way to get this one done, and that probably sets up a matchup next week against Andrean from the region with Drake Bowen, the 5-star Notre Dame commit, which I really wanted to see, how Lures would face against him. He's such a talented player. That being said, we may as well get to see it with Eastside. So hopefully the Blazers can get another one, and we can be talking about Eastside football for yet another week.
Yeah, and Eastbrook, they play the double wing here, a strong run program, Angle with almost 1,000 yards rushing, but Dalton was 619, and the quarterback Angle with 470 yards rushing. So they can just rush the ball for days, as we saw earlier this year in that win against New Haven. And Casey, going back to Bishop Lures, this is the first time all year that Carson Clark did not throw for a touchdown and Brody Glenn did not receive a touchdown. You wouldn't think that would happen against an Eastside team, maybe a Carroll squad or something like that earlier in the season, but to another 2A opponent. That just speaks to Eastside and them just stepping up their play this past Friday.
Well, and they kind of committed to try to take Brody away, and they did that a year ago as well. So, again, credit those players and the coaching staff out at Eastside. I mean, they gave some help, safety help his side, and they just couldn't connect consistently enough, certainly not on any big plays. And what was most shocking to me is, 3 points in 3 quarters of play. I mean, this is a team that scored 38 points against Carroll. Granted, it was week 1, but 38 points. They scored 40 some points, I think, or against Homestead. They put up big points against Bishop Dwenger. The only top half team they did score a lot of points was against Snyder late in week 9 because they were playing in a mud bath. So 45 points against Homestead, and then against Dwenger 41. That's remarkable. I don't think anybody would have thought that. They went into that game averaging, well over 40 points per game and only scored 3 points through 3 quarters of action. Just shocking. But again, it's high school football, and they're 16, 17-year-old kids, and emotions run high, and sometimes the moment gets the best of you. And the Eastside Blazers, to their credit, were prepared. They were focused. They were physical, and they earned that win. They outperformed Bishop Lures. And then by the time Lures flipped the switch and got a couple scores in the fourth quarter, it was too little too late. And it almost felt like Eastside a year earlier getting some scores late to draw within in a high-scoring affair last year at Lures Field. This was more defensive dominated, and I never would have saw that coming. So again, now they have to shift gears, and they play completely, like you said, a run-oriented offense, option offense with a quarterback that's really a good runner, makes great decisions. A completely different game plan preparation, 1 week removed from what Bishop Lures presents. Can the Blazers rise up again where their defensive coaches put something together for them to come up with another win against an undefeated program? Well, we're going to find out. I sure hope so. It'll be a fun one.
Well, Casey, moving on to 1A, Adams Central traveling to South Adams. South Adams has had a nice run here in the postseason, but you got Adams Central winning it by 27. And earlier this year, it was a 48-7 drubbing at Adams Central. But this time we'll be in Bern, Indiana.
Yeah, and Aiden Warner, remember, did not play in that first matchup, the senior quarterback. He's kind of their heart and soul senior leader on the offensive side of the ball. They've slowly gotten a few other guys back who had injuries earlier in the year. They're not 100% by any means, but they are improved. Jordan Hinshaw and Maverick Somerset are 2 real good playmakers to keep an eye on for South Adams. They love the underdog role. Again, talking to Grant Mosier, the head coach of the Starfires this morning, I mean, he loves it. He knows everybody's going to pick against him. He knows AC's a big favorite. He's just a real fiery, spirited coach. I know his kids love playing for him, and they're relishing this underdog role that they've got. I expect it to be much closer than the first time around, but man, Adams Central's really, really good, Jeff. And I think, Coach Michael Mosher, I think this is his best senior class since he's been there, and he's had some good ones. Barring some early turnovers or some miscues, I just can't see Adams Central's speed on both sides of the ball. Their defensive speed is tremendous. Their one close game in the postseason was at Churubusco. They lost by 10 points, and I think Churubusco plays a more physical brand of football than South Adams does right now. South Adams really wants to throw it around, and if the field's kind of murky and not in great condition, that will probably help Adams Central. Playing, wanting to run the ball a little bit more, even though their junior quarterback is certainly capable of passing it. But I just, it's a rivalry game. It's a ACAC conference rivalry game. It's kind of funny. It always cracks me up how these two get a chance to meet each other in the regional, and they're only a handful of miles apart from each other. I don't know how somebody down there finagled that, but kudos to them, because I love seeing these two get a chance to play for the right to play for a semi-state title next week. So one of our local Adams teams, if you will be moving on to the Final Four in Class 1A.
Yeah, and if Carroll Flora is able to beat North Judson, then Adams Central will host that game. Other than that, it looks like they'd be on the road at North Judson, and South Adams, they're going to be on the road regardless. But you've been saying it all year. You really feel like this Adams Central team is going to end up at Lucas Oil.
I do, and I think Indianapolis Lutheran is also undefeated on the bottom half of the bracket. If you would have asked me back in the third week of August when we were kicking off the season, who's going to play in the 1A state championship, I would have said Indy Lutheran and Adams Central. So no huge surprise there. So again, this is going to be a fun one. I know better that after last week than saying this is Adams Central's game for sure, because anything can happen. I mean, we may be talking a week from now and South Adams may rise up and make this a really close contest or even win. That would be surprising though. Just like three of the games last week were surprising. So we'll see. It's been a fantastic season at this point. You just want to see as many local teams as possible get an opportunity to keep moving on. For my money, I'm going with the Flying Jets. And I think they win it fairly comfortably. Too many weapons, too much speed on both sides of the ball. And we know at least we'll have one local team because these two are playing each other to root for in the semi-state next week. Hopefully we get a 6A, a 5A, a 3A, and East Side and 2A. So it'd be really neat to get 5 out of 6 classes represented in the semi-state. Still can't believe that Leo's not in this conversation this week, but that's high school sports. That's athletics. And you got to, again, take your hat off to the Northridge Raiders. What an upset.
Casey, 5 weeks ago, you were saying probably Carson Clark, your player of the year. 3 weeks ago, you were thinking Mason Sharon. You've been saying all season long that Laban Davis is right up there with everybody else we've mentioned. Is he starting to solidify that?
He might be, Jeff. I mean, I've wavered on all those other guys except Laban. I had him in that conversation, as you know, week 1.
Yeah.
I think somebody else who's kind of thrust themselves back into the conversation is senior quarterback Jeffrey Becker at Carroll. Even though his numbers haven't been that spectacular, they're still playing. They're our big school representative right now. They improved all year long. He's kind of willed them to some success offensively, especially lately here with Jameson Coverstar out of the mix. If he has a big game against Westfield and they win, 1 or 2 more games, I think Jeffrey Becker is definitely into the conversation. But if you pin me down right now, I'd say Laban Davis is my guy. I'd like to see a little bit more work from the Blazers, and meaning another win or 2 to solidify that. And I think it just speaks to the parity and the talent that we have in Northeast Indiana. It's not just in the SAC schools like the perception is. It's everywhere. I mean, there's great talent at East Noble. There's great talent at Adams Central, at Eastside, at Cherubusco, smaller schools, and then big schools like Carroll and Homestead and Leo and on and on and on. So, of course, Bishop Dwenger, if they make a run to state, does somebody in like a Jack Titman throw himself into the conversation? I would not rule that out, especially if his numbers would tick up in terms of maybe receptions or tackles for loss, sacks, things like that. So it's still, there's still a lot on the table. There's still a lot of work left to be done. It's been a fantastic year. Last week, there were just some real shockers. This week, if there's any shockers, hopefully they're on the right side here for Northeast Indiana.
Absolutely, Casey. Well, you got Carroll losing to Westfield by 13, and last year Westfield beat Homestead 42-9, and it was a good Homestead team. But wow, that's going to be a tough task for Carroll. But if anybody can lead him to it, it'd definitely be Jeffrey Becker. And that defense has been awesome. I think Dylan Bennett could start on pretty much every single team at middle linebacker in this state. I feel like he's that good of a player. And I'm with you. I like Dwenger winning it at Westfield. I just feel like this is a totally different team than what we saw at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Better bring up the Saints helmet here so I don't get in any trouble. The gold helmets. Again, we brought pizza out to the Saints. There's a different vibe. I mean, you showed that 4 losses in 5 weeks. Remarkable, the resiliency of young people and to see these kids bounce back, overcome some nagging injuries and then of course outside perception that the program is underachieving, fair or unfair. For those kids to rally and put forth an effort like they did a week ago, that was something special. Can they build on that momentum and come up with another huge win on the road against an Indy, not a huge school, but a large school in the Indianapolis area, that Westfield, Noblesville, Zionsville area with Fishers and Hamilton Southeastern, all that area is just massive in terms of growth, great talent. They oftentimes, a lot of these programs have former Colts players, kids playing for them, that kind of thing. Rich, very fertile area of high school football. So this would be a huge win for the Saints, but I like what I saw last week. They play like they did last week. I think they find a way to get it done. I really, really do. I mean, there's a lot of things that have to go in their favor. No turnovers, be physical, penalties. And they didn't play a perfect game by any means last week against Snyder, but my goodness, they still won by 22 points and it was no fluke.
No, absolutely not. Well, Casey, I hope you enjoy the games this Friday, and we'll check back in with you next week as we preview the semi-state matchups.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Casey. Have a great weekend, everybody.